Alright guys, this is going to be a recap of the Panthers win against the Bengals this Saturday in Idaho. Um, the format is going to be slightly abbreviated compared to the past 2 weeks. I know I normally, or I've put at least in the other videos, the offensive and defensive stats, but for this one we're just going to go over the scoring summaries, the drives in general, and then just looking to game notes before previewing Youngstown State. So, looking at let me move my icon here. Looking at the scoring summaries and just summaries in general, you've got a punt that ends in a. This is a nice long drive. Ends with I'm looking at the actually. I have off to the side here who scored. I've got Ty Edwards 2-yard run. So long drive. Following the score from Ty, we've got a fumble that directly leads to a touchdown. As you can see, obviously it's a pretty efficient drive, right? 2 plays, 65 yards. 53 of those yards are Sam Schnee, who had a career game, over 170 yards receiving, 2 scores, and that's just in 3 quarters, which is phenomenal. We'll touch on that a little later. I'll mention where he ranks nationally now after just one game, really, right? After that, we've got State hitting a couple field goals. I feel like the kicking situation in Idaho, on a slight tangent, Idaho State is probably similar to UNI. You've got really similar looking domes, just looking at it from ESPN Plus. I wasn't at the game, if that wasn't already clear, but I feel like the kicking situation is pretty similar. And I know we had a miss later in the game, but you've got two made field goals there. After a punt from State, we've got another field goal from us. I'm trying to see if I can get some measurements. That one was 47 yards, it says, so that's pretty nice. 47-yard field goal. We've got an interception there, which leads to a score for us, and then that's another Sam Schnee touchdown. Shockingly, this one's 14 yards. Just looking at it here, and that is how, as far as I can tell, right, that's how we end the half. Is score 27-3. Looking at the second half here, we've got a punt leading to turnover on downs, which, if you guys watched the game, that was just a clunky drive, right? You've got fourth down. They went for it in fourth down, and then the snap was high, and it was just like, it seemed a little, I don't know, discombobulated. However, I will make the argument that the whole start of the second half was kind of bad for us too, because we've got us punting, and then after their turnover on downs, we have a missed field goal, so we can capitalize, and that's obviously rare for Matthew, right? He's team captain, preseason All-American, so a lot of punting. This I found was interesting, right? You have all the scoring crammed at the very end. How much of this is authentic, especially since there was a quarterback change? I know we were running the ball with our third-string running back. Regardless, this is all legitimate scoring. I'll try to give you exactly who scored here. I've got Harrison Baboui getting his first score of the season, as far as I can tell, in a 3-yard run. Idaho State has a run of their own. Then Josh Jenkins comes in, so that's nice. So we had both our backup running backs score. That's a 12-yard run. And then Michael Shilikov, I want to say is how you pronounce his name. He ends up scoring for them. He had I don't know if he had a catch. I just remember he just looked impressive against Utah State when I was looking at the video previewing this game. That he was just a big body guy, and then we still didn't limit him completely. Obviously, he got a score, but he had a much quieter game this game than against Utah. So that's the end of the game there. That's the final score is 41-17, although that might be a little more misleading because for most of the game, the margin was a little higher there. All right, game notes. I already touched on Sam. This is what I was talking about in terms of listing where he ranks. So he's 7, and let's say 8 minutes left in the third. So he really just did it in two quarters. He's 7th nationally now in receiving, and that's only 75 yards short of the nationwide leader. So let's say if we had played, instead of Weber State, right, if we had played Actually, I don't want to say another like NAIA Iowa team, because didn't they just beat Drake? If anyone follows that, there was, I think, Morningside, right? Or Northwestern, Iowa Northwestern. Either way, if we had played a team that was of lesser competition, even an unranked FCS team, you can make the argument, right, he'd be higher on this list. And then he's 10th nationally for receiving yards per game, averaging over 100 yards now. Thanks obviously very much because of this game here. Offensive line gave him no sacks, and that's accurate. Near perfect game. I added Theo had 75% completion on, it was 39 attempts. I just rounded up to 40. And this I touched on as well. We these two, Jenkins had 6.3 average. He led us in rushing, even though he only really ran in the second half and really mostly just the fourth quarter. I just believe Edwards was just pulled because of the score. I didn't hear that he was injured. I could be wrong. What I think is somewhat concerning, but just important to note, that this defense in Idaho State, if you looked at the other video, if you just watched the Utah State game or highlights, you'll see that they gave up a ton of rushing yards. So the fact that they were able actually to stop our lead back, it's just something to note, something to consider. All right. And then, yeah, just looking at some more continued notes. Defense is stout. They only gave up 30 points in the first half. This should say backup quarterback. So their leading rusher for their team was their backup quarterback, 25 yards. That should speak for itself. Bailey's got 3 sacks in the game. Phenomenal. Boyd has 1 as well. And then this is what I was talking about a little bit with the receiver. So we did give up 121 yards to one guy. I believe his name is Shadon, is how you pronounce it, James. So one guy to have 121. Obviously not outstanding, but the fact that their second and third leading receivers also combined for 100. I believe they had maybe one had 55, 45, the other one, and they scored. And they should say, for 100 as well, and both scored, or late scores, I guess is what I probably meant to say there. So, not ideal. Wu, I'll just touch on that briefly. He had that play at the end of the first half where he tackled that dude, and then was kind of chirping, just stepped over him after he got up tackling him. I just love that kind of electric energy, even if it was at the end of the first half when they were going into the locker room. And then the targeting call that they ended up reviewing on Wu, that was deemed a late hit. Didn't look malicious. That's just how he plays. You wonder if that will change, or if that will prompt a conversation with him, maybe to limit that. But I think the team feeds off that kind of energy. I certainly have no problem with it. It's just a fan. So this is probably where this video is most useful for someone just stumbling upon this video, looking at Youngstown State here in a couple weeks. Sorry, I'm just trying to move myself out of the screen. All right, there we go. They played Robert Morris. They won by 20 points. Their leading receivers had over 100 receiving yards. I wish I would have added this before I started. Both had over 100 receiving yards in the game and 6 catches. Running backs had great games. 4 rushing touchdowns, 2 for each. Their main back had over 100 yards. The second guy, Rushton, which is a great name for running back, also had 2 rushing touchdowns of his own, and had I think it was a little over 50 yards. They had 35 unanswered points after the score was pretty close in the second quarter. And then I just wrote that those drives after that 14-13 score, some of those scoring drives at the end of the first half were set up by kind of these big chunk plays. So, I mean, obviously, if we're going to have any success, it's probably not great that we had a similar situation going on against Idaho State where we were giving up a lot of receiving yards, but it's just something to note that it seems like that's how the Penguins are going to play as well. In that game, there was a 70-yard pass in the fourth quarter to that aforementioned dude, Bryce Oliver, which is a record. I don't know if it's a program record or if it's just a historical time thing where someone hasn't achieved that long of a reception, I guess, in a long time. And I would have to double check if that was a touchdown or if that was just a pass. But I know it was 70 yards. So there you go. They're 2 weeks prior to this game here. They played Ohio State, which was a loss, predictably. That's where that 1-1 record comes from. And then they played Valpo, who they destroyed in the second half. And Valpo, just because I'm a little familiar with Valparaiso, they lost to a NAIA team already. And we can go into some details maybe in another video about the similarities between Pioneer League football and Division III, just because both don't really have scholarships. But maybe just to take that with a grain of salt then, this victory over Valpo, which is really just a glorified Division III team in terms of talent. The score was pretty close at halftime. I guess to commend Youngstown against Ohio State, they did win the time of possession battle. And I believe the amount of plays that they had was similar as well. I was reading that. So even though the Buckeyes won convincingly, in what wasn't a complete beatdown, I think it was still like a 40-7 score, somewhere around that range. Still something to keep in mind that we're playing a team that was able to win some battles against the Buckeyes. So that'll be it for me for this one here. As always, I'll be in Section T if anyone wants to say hi. So appreciate it, guys. Thanks for watching.